Hello，大家好，又見到我啦。或者我哋可唔可以坐前啲啊？咁樣可以減少嗰個距離，或者坐前少少啊，好嘛？係啦，真係乖，係坐前啲，係啦。咁樣比較親切。我哋應該係超過咗個 social distancing 1米嘅距離，唔需要去到10米。好，咁今日咧。依家5點，好多謝大家可以堅持到依家啦。咁我相信咧，即係大家陣間聽我哋對談完之後咧，一定係有所。
So I'm sure you will learn something from our talk at this session. So next to me is Ming Yan, Joseph Ngai. Because of pandemic, we have scheduled earlier this year for the book release, but because of pandemic now we push and postpone to this book release of his new book. So we've done lots of preparation for this book in order to release it. Why so special? Because it's written by Joseph. So right now, he's a teacher at one of the MACAU's middle schools. He has many hobbies. He likes coffee and tea and wine. He also writes a column at the Huaqiao Daily. For this book, this is actually a compilation of all his articles written in Huaqiao Daily. It's nicely designed on the cover with a starry sky. At the beginning, it was a cover in pink, yet Joseph insisted to have a blue cover. So we actually took quite a lot of effort in a way, in an urgent time frames to change the cover. So since I am his editor, I learned that he wants to write articles. The articles that are actually very short in length. It's perfect for reading at night. Articles that can inspire readers, as if you're reading books, reading under the starry sky at night. So this is the reason of such a book cover. Why don't we just give the floor to Joseph now to talk about his book? Thank you. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here finally on stage. I've been staying here and listen to various people sharing their thoughts. So about pandemic, for me, for writers and for artists, this is a very good opportunity in a way. I've heard how the impact of pandemic towards all these artists and writers. So I was actually jotting notes while listening to all these talks just now. So for this book, all the articles are inspired by everyday life. There's several themes and genres in this book. So one part it's about my workplace, which is campus in a middle school. Since I'm teaching at a middle school, I love writing. I love creating with words. So this is something I really wish to share with people. So I encounter many people and students as well, even they are younger. They have lots of life experiences that inspire me and touch me. I digested their thoughts and their life experiences, then created with words. So for me, creation is about in passing on stuff and knowledge. Although I would like to, there's some stories that I covered are actually anonymous. I wish like in the future the students can read these things. So besides my workplace, which is one of the themes of my creations, there there are also other parts, including poetries, as well as the traditional Chinese martial arts themes. Besides, I also write things that's quite personal. For example, my response and feelings towards popular culture in a society, for example, and also other aspects, for example, tea culture, and movies, and even the game culture as well. So for this book that I've came up with, I wish the audience would be my students as well. So, but for my previous work, my previous book, it was mostly about it was a book for my lover. So here in the audience, I see some of my students present here. All right, these are my students. Yes. So I've told them that my students can be late. You know, last time when I was at my book release at Pinto, LIVRO, they're always late. Every day, their attendance is something I concern the most. They're always late, and I keep repeating not to be punctual all the time. Of course, everyone has their own work. Even some of my students, they are already graduated and they are working now. Yet we get inspirations through our everyday life, all the trivial stuff happening in everyday life. For me, literature is also about passing on knowledge, passing on experiences. So for everyone here, you have your own interests and hobbies, not necessarily literature, but how do we keep and pass on your creations and your works to others? That's important for our culture. So when I'm publishing this book, I said actually I feel I don't have any regrets anymore. I can finish my life already, because this is something I already passed on. It seems I have left something in this world already. So this is it. So when as an editor, I was reading the first 3 chapters. I haven't read the last chapter because I decided to read the last chapter with a physical published book in my hand. So as Joseph said, for the first chapter, it's all about. For the first chapter, it's about the lives of students. I actually cried after reading the first chapter at night. Maybe some of the experiences that really touched me, that resonate with me. Because I think sometimes you thought that things happening in our lives are unique, but actually it's not that true. It seems everyone sort of experiences things, similar things, especially for students. As a teacher, Joseph pays lots of attention and efforts in observing the students' lives and also transfer them and translate them into his creations. I remember there's one article. He wrote that there's a girl student. There's a student. She went to for a competition, but eventually she realized that she actually has to repeat the year and cannot move to the next year in school. So this is one of the examples. I am so impressed by all the stories about the students. For example, how do the students feel when the teacher actually put the stories, the real stories, into words and published as books? How do they feel? So the girl, the student you mentioned today, I know who she is, and she said, she can't be present today. She's busy today, so she can't come here. So, lots of students, they have to go back to home, and especially in mainland China, for example. So this girl, she's my student. As a teacher, when we have to conclude the semester, we realize that because of the scores are not high enough, they might have to repeat the school year, instead of moving on to the next year. The numbers of these students are very few. However, unfortunately, two students had to repeat. I was very worried and concerned. Her classmates will write weekly journals. Before the results out, she sort of realized that she might have to repeat the year. In the weekly journal, I actually wrote something like, "Don't worry." I wrote a smiley face as my response to her weekly journal. Because of that smiley face, she got this feeling that she might have to repeat. So people misread smiley faces or emojis. That that actually have lots of impacts on the students. So when the news is out that she has to repeat the year, as I mentioned before, the result was out when she was away from Macau, so I can't immediately deal with the situation in person with her. So this is a struggle and a dilemma, and in a way, eventually I was very concerned and worried, but later, this girl actually transferred to a Chinese section of the school, while I'm actually teaching at English section of the school. So she's actually a very considerate student. She helped me a lot in school, and she's very good. She's a very talented girl. She paints very well. I still remember that once, I keep encourage students to write poetry. She told me that she loves writing poetry. So it somehow comes like she was very spontaneously loving this activity. What I think is that as a teacher, I can influence the students and I can give them inspirations, and I believe that this is very good that they got this exposure, and for me this is very important. Why so special about this student? She once wrote a poem, a special poem in a special format, where all the lines of a stanza of poetry, the first word of several lines can make a complete sentence. That's a very interesting format of Chinese poetry, and I encouraged her to publish it in a newspaper. I just do some minor editing of that poem. So
And normally when I ask them to write the poetry, I'll ask my students to show them through PowerPoint, and I'll ask them to comment and to analyze and to give their opinions or ideas among themselves. And many of the students, they were surprised to find that she actually wrote an acrostic poem. And I didn't realize that. And so when many of the students try to read it, we discover that. And we were impressed. And this student also bought my poetry. And she told me that she wants to study Chinese literature. And in your book, I can see how you treat your students and also many different matters in their lives. And I see that there are a lot of interaction between you and the students, and I'm very touched by this. And so apart from the lives of the students, you also mentioned about the local situation and phenomenon. For example, a few years ago, we had the Typhoon Hato, and also you involve some articles about the lockdown. So when you write about the situation of Macau, I'm wondering where you get the inspirations and perspectives. So as a writer or the first-hand person who experienced it, so how do you get your inspiration? So in the past, as I was very busy with work as a teacher, and I believe that many of you are interested in creation, for many of you who are here today. And many of us face the struggle of how to balance our time between work and our hobbies. And I'm very fortunate to be invited to write articles for the newspaper. If not, I don't think I will be able to publish this book. I think this is an opportunity or a platform for me to publish my articles in a regular basis. So I have cultivated this habit of writing because I have to publish one article every week. And so I'm used to find inspiration from my daily lives or from my observations in life. I think this happens to everyone. We all do that every day. However, we are doing this, but we are not inheriting it or passing it on. This also happens to many different kinds of arts. We need the opportunity to realize it and to pass it on. And today, I've listened to many speakers talking about their creations and the issues of lockdown. And I think for this book, I didn't expect it to happen. And I have the pressure to launch this book due to the pandemic. And actually, I've got much more time, and we are experiencing the new normal under the pandemic. And the habits that we used to have changed during the lockdown. And this is a very significant opportunity. And as I'm working from home, I can also deal with the work that I have to do when I'm in the office. So what is the meaning of going to the office? These are things that we can think about. And so some of the content in this book were written during the pandemic. And some are from the articles that I publish in the newspaper. And so I compiled them into a book. And I mentioned that there are different categories inside the book. And I'm interested in dividing them into different categories, and I want to involve some kind of like surprise in the book. This is like a little game for the readers, so they can find something interesting inside. So you talk about inheritance, and I think this book also involves some lines of the other poets. So he used Tam Junyin, one of the poets, in the previous talk, and he put some lines from her poem into his book. So let's go back to the topic. So it's very spontaneous. So in the past, I seldom did a tribute to any author or writers. Well, you didn't put my poem in your book, but I think it's very special because there are like over 100 articles inside the book, and for each article he used a different poem. So I think he's been reading a lot. And he's picked a lot of the poetries that I enjoy reading a lot. And I want to ask you why you have chosen this way in your creation. So when I first started writing for the newspaper, I think working for this is like a habit because you do it like every week, and I've developed my own way on working it. So I write poetry, and I seldom write the essays, and I think poetry is more like alluding to things. And when I put some lines into the essay, I feel like people will want to know more. They get curious about the content. And these essays might not be as interesting as stories. And so I'm trying to think about ways to make it more interesting for the readers. And some poems were written by my students or even by myself. So I try to use them in each of my articles. And this has become a habit, and I'm trying to repeat it every time when I start writing an article. And I believe this is a very good habit for me. And meanwhile, it's kind of like a limitation. And I've already been thinking about what I should write for my next book. And, I love wine, and so I want to put it into my book. Well, I may put it into my third or fourth book. So for each article, I want to involve wine, a poem. So for this creation, it's very demanding. And I want to give myself a format or a framework to work on. So I think you're a very well-read person. And apart from poetry and wine, I think there are some other things that can cause empathy to the audience. And I think recently there are some topics that the audience might be interested in. That's the Chinese wuxia topics. So for the students who finish their Form 6 studies and entering the university, they've got a period of time and they're quite free, and they might spend time watching the TV series. And the topic is the Chinese Kung Fu or Wuxia topics. And there are the beautiful actors and actresses. And I think it does not really present the real or the original taste of the topic. But when you try to watch those TV series that were taken a long time ago, you might be able to get a better glimpse or a more authentic taste of this topic. I think nowadays they're trying to do it in a more glamorous way, so it's different. And I know that you love reading Jinrong's novels, wuxia novels. And well, sometimes I try to write them when I see that the TV series are being broadcast on TV. And I wasn't a very hardworking student. During Chinese class, I usually read novels secretly in class. And the teachers just let me have my own way. And so I spent the time reading what I loved. And I was glad that the teachers allowed me to do so. But I have to remind my students not to do the same thing, like me. And from that time onwards, I started loving reading these novels. And I remember watching those TVB series, and I also read them in class. For example, The Smiling Proud Wanderer by Jinrong. And of course, there are many other books that are worth reading, but I'm really interested in that. And these books also inspired me in my creation. And I think you are a very lively and vibrant person. And I know that you also enjoy playing games. And well, actually, I'm influenced by my students. I get familiar with my students because of games.
So we're talking about, for example, the video game culture. This is part of pop culture for sure. A few years ago, I wrote some articles or poems and proses about certain games in the last few years. For example, I wrote something about Pokemon Go, or also there's a mobile phone game about feeding a frog, a traveling frog, for example. All these pop cultures and app games and all that, I touched upon all these topics. So yeah, so your works actually cover lots of wide range of topics, right? So today we do not have much time left. Maybe any questions from the floor, especially the students of Joseph's. You can give questions or opinions. So feel free to raise your questions or opinions, especially the students who graduated. So take a chance to ask me questions. Don't feel pressured. So I've been sitting there for the whole afternoon, and I really love coming up on stage and express myself, you know. So So any questions? So she's actually my colleague, my ex-colleague. She's also a teacher herself. Hello. Hello. Good afternoon. Just now you mentioned Joseph loves reading wuxia novels, the Chinese martial arts novels, especially written by the famous novelist Jin Yong. He mentioned that he loves the novel called The Smiling Proud Wanderer. Why you like this novel that much? This is a classic, of course. So I believe it really matters about the timing when a certain word enters into your life, right? So about in this book, The Smiling Proud Wanderer, it was a classic, and I read this book when I was in my high school years. You know, that was a time when we yearned for freedom, and it was a journey. During that period, it was a journey of self-discovery, right? So reading wuxia novels, the Chinese martial arts novels, it's all about finding yourself along the way. It's more like away from our reality. You know, it's all imaginary world in those wuxia novels. It's all about self-pursuit of life's meaning and all that. So the protagonist, called Ling Huchong, in this novel, he's not completely a good guy. He has a very complicated character and personality. Especially for wuxia novels, it's all about opportunities and timing in their lives. You know, certain chances happen in their life that can actually change a person's life and life directions. So when I was in my high school years, I didn't understand that much. Yet the plots of that novel were very unforgettable. So I wish the book and as well as those novels can actually allow more young people to read and to enter into the world of literature. For me, honestly, my favorite book when I was in middle school was the Red Chamber, The Dream of Red Chamber, one of the classics in Chinese literature. In that novel, you know, all the girls in that novel, several girls, they established a poetry society. That actually, in fact, influenced me a lot. This is the reason why one of the reasons why I established a poetry society nowadays. So that is one of the impacts reading gives me. So I still remember. So after one of your writings, you wrote about eating crabs, right? So that actually is very close to our everyday life. You know, literature can be very close to you. I believe each book has its own meaning. And the most important thing is to learn and digest the book and make it into something of your own. Not that you just finish the book and then put it aside, right? So the responsible way is to, you know, digest and fully absorb everything in the book. Any other response from the floor or questions? So we still have a few minutes left. Hi, Joseph. Congratulations, I haven't read your book yet. I have a question. Why you name your book as poetry reading notes? Like reading notes. Why you use this term? There are two reasons. First, I was studying in Taiwan. I had a very strict teacher. This is one of my anecdotes. You know, I was a rebellious kid back then. The teacher was very strict, and he asked us to write weekly reading notes. Yet I disliked that teacher a lot because he gave us lots of workload and readings and homeworks. He disliked students being late, so once he was criticizing the students, but I actually sort of attacked the teacher in my reading notes, in my homework, and it was like a fight in words. Eventually, he failed me. It was my college years. I wasn't sure what I was exactly looking for or what I want to become in the future. I was kind of lazy guy. Yet, eventually, I got a very high score at the end of the semester. It was quite an episode in my college lives, and that actually allows me to understand myself better and to know to understand what I really wish in my life. So that's why I use this word reading notes that is connected to that anecdote. So secondly, reading notes is something like making notes and jotting notes. This is our habits, right? One of our everyday habits, or even habits in middle school. When we are learning, when we are studying at classroom, so what is it all about? Jotting notes, right? So you can't completely copy what the teacher says. This is pointless. I used to have a hostile attitude towards jotting notes because it's not about copying, in my point of view. But in recent years, in my teaching, I think that notes is important. So I still name this book as Poetry Reading Notes. Because when you're writing reading notes, when you name this, I thought you wrote the wrong character, but actually I understand more the meaning you want to convey with this title now. So our time is up now, so we have to conclude the talk here. Thank you so much, and we hope we can continue our communication and exchange off stage, and hope this book release and talk can inspire you. So let's stay in touch. Thank you.